Deep thinkers aren't deep because they're intelligent. They're deep because their mind refuses to skim life. While most people experience a moment and move on, your brain stops. It zooms in. It dissects. It searches for what was meant, what was implied, what was felt beneath the surface. And sometimes, you wish it wouldn't. Because the same mind that gives you insight also keeps you awake at night. In this video, we're going to explore the real psychology behind deep thinkers. Where this depth actually begins. Why it can feel like both a gift and a burden. The hidden shadow side most people never talk about. And how to stop drowning in your own thoughts, without losing your depth. Because being a deep thinker isn't the problem. Living trapped inside your own mind is. And here's something that might surprise you. Your depth may not have started as curiosity. It may have started as survival. And once you understand that, everything changes. There's a quiet kind of person who doesn't just live life, they interpret it. They don't just hear words, they study tone. They don't just feel emotions, they question where they came from, what they reveal, and where they might lead. If that sounds like you, this isn't random. Psychologically, deep thinkers are often high in openness to experience and trait introspection. That means your brain is wired to explore patterns, possibilities, and hidden meanings. Your default mode network, the system responsible for reflection and imagination, is highly active. In simple terms, your mind keeps running even when nothing is happening. You don't just think. You think about your thinking. And that's rare. But depth is not the same as intelligence. It's a combination of pattern recognition, emotional sensitivity, and metacognition, the ability to observe your own mental processes. You notice subtle shifts in people's expressions. You sense tension before anyone names it. You replay conversations not because you're insecure, but because you want accuracy. But high-resolution perception can also mean high-resolution doubt. Imagine this. You send someone a message. They reply with one word. Okay. Most people shrug and move on. You don't. You replay the entire interaction. You examine your tone. You wonder if something changed. You scan for subtext. Now it's been 30 minutes. Nothing happened. But your mind constructed 10 alternate interpretations. And the exhausting part isn't the thought itself. It's the need to resolve it. Deep thinkers don't just think. They seek closure. And when closure doesn't come, the mind keeps digging. This is where rumination begins. It feels productive. But it rarely is. Your strength is nuance. Your struggle is overextension. Deep thinkers live in layers. Every event connects to a larger pattern. You don't just make a mistake. You connect it to your childhood, your habits, your future. You don't just feel rejected. You question your attachment style, your worth, your patterns in love. You don't just make a decision. You simulate 5 future scenarios. You call it responsibility. Sometimes, it's fear of regret. And regret, for a deep thinker, feels catastrophic. Because you replay it in high definition. Here's another subtle pattern. Deep thinkers often struggle with quick decisions. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they see too many variables. If someone asks where you want to eat, your brain calculates distance, mood, cost, timing, preference, potential disappointment. Choice becomes complexity. Complexity becomes hesitation. And hesitation becomes self-doubt. Over time, this turns into analysis paralysis. Your depth was meant to give you clarity. Instead, it creates friction. When you walk into a room, you don't just see people. You feel atmosphere. You sense tension between two friends. You notice when someone is forcing laughter. You pick up micro-expressions most people ignore. That's empathy. But here's the hidden cost. You don't just observe emotions. You internalize them. Someone else's stress becomes your stress. Someone else's sadness lingers in your chest. And you don't always know where your emotions end and others begin. Over time, this creates emotional fatigue. You're tired, not from doing too much, but from perceiving too much. Now let's go deeper. Your depth may not have started as curiosity. It may have started as survival. For many deep thinkers, childhood required awareness. Maybe you had to read mood shifts. Maybe you had to anticipate conflict. Maybe silence felt safer than expression. That early environment wires the nervous system to scan. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. What began as protection becomes personality. You're later described as mature, wise beyond your years, different. But underneath that identity is a nervous system that never fully relaxed. And once the brain becomes a scanner, it rarely powers down. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes deep thinking is control disguised as wisdom. If I analyze it enough, if I understand it enough, if I predict every outcome, then nothing can surprise me. Nothing can hurt me. But life doesn't reward perfect preparation. It demands participation. Understanding does not equal safety. It just postpones vulnerability. Deep thinkers often feel lonely, not because others are shallow, but because depth changes pacing. You pause before speaking. You filter your thoughts. You consider multiple interpretations before choosing one sentence. By the time you're ready, the conversation has moved on. So you stay silent. Others interpret your silence as detachment. You interpret their speed as superficiality. Neither is entirely true. You simply process differently. But over time, this difference creates distance. You meet someone you genuinely care about. Instead of surrendering to the feeling, you dissect it. Are they emotionally stable? Is this sustainable? What are the red flags? What could go wrong? You call it discernment. Sometimes it's fear of surrender. Deep thinkers don't struggle to love. They struggle to stop evaluating. And intimacy requires moments where evaluation pauses. Then there's the existential layer. You don't just question your life. You question life itself. Why are we conscious? Why does time move forward? Why does everything meaningful eventually fade? You can feel joy and grief in the same moment. You can watch a sunset and think about mortality. That's not depression. It's cognitive complexity. But the more complexity you perceive, the harder it is to live simply. You see too many angles to feel certain. Eventually, many deep thinkers hit a wall. Mental fatigue, emotional exhaustion, decision overload. You realize, I understand everything, but I'm not at peace. And that realization is painful, because you trusted your mind to guide you. But the mind that gives you insight cannot give you rest. Rest requires something different. Trust. There are 3 stages of depth. Stage 1. Survival depth. You analyze to stay safe. Stage 2. Intellectual depth. You analyze to understand. Stage 3. Integrated depth. You still think deeply, but you no longer live trapped in thought. You can feel without dissecting. You can love without constant evaluation. You can speak without rehearsing. You can sit in silence without solving existence. Integrated depth is not shallowness. It's balance. It's knowing your mind is powerful, but not always accurate. You are not your analysis. You are the awareness observing it. When you stop treating every thought as truth, space appears. And in that space, peace grows. Your depth is not a flaw. But it doesn't have to be your armor. You don't need to anticipate every pain to survive. You already survived. Now the real challenge begins. Not thinking your way through life, but participating in it. Deep thinking is a gift. But without grounding, it becomes rumination. Without presence, it becomes isolation. Without balance, it becomes exhaustion. Depth becomes wisdom when it serves life, not when it replaces it. If this resonated with you, take a moment and reflect. Are you thinking to understand life? Or thinking to avoid feeling it? Awareness is the first shift. In the next video, we'll explore something closely connected to this. Why highly self-aware people often struggle with happiness. Because awareness alone doesn't guarantee peace. And sometimes, The smartest minds need the simplest truths.